So many personality theories out there seem to focus on what's wrong with us. But Gordon Allport, he was way more fascinated by what goes right. So today, we're going to dive into his incredible, groundbreaking work on the unique, healthy individual.
So let's just start with the really big question, the one that pretty much drove Allport's entire career. What does a healthy personality actually look like? I mean, think about it. In a field that was so often obsessed with neurosis and dysfunction, he really dedicated himself to understanding psychological maturity.
Okay, so Allport's main idea was, well, it was a pretty radical break from what everybody else was doing at the time. He basically said, hey, to understand people, maybe we shouldn't spend all our time digging around for hidden motives from their childhood. Instead, he argued, let's just listen to them. Let's focus on what's driving them consciously, right now, and the stable traits that make them who they are.
And this whole approach is the foundation of what we call dispositional theory. Now, it sounds kind of fancy, but the idea is actually super intuitive. It's the view that our personality is made up of these stable, internal things called traits. Characteristics that guide how we act and feel, pretty consistently, no matter what's going on around us.
All right, so that's the theory. But this is where it gets really practical. See, Allport wasn't just some academic with his head in the clouds. He wanted to pin down what a psychologically mature person actually looks like. So, what did he come up with? What are the criteria?
Well, he laid out a few key hallmarks. First up, emotional security and self-acceptance. Just being comfortable in your own skin. Next, having a realistic view of the world around you. And also, being problem-oriented, which means you're focused on solving things out there in the world, not just on yourself. But that last point he made, that one is arguably the big one.
Yeah, exactly. For Allport, the secret sauce, the thing that ties it all together, is having a unifying philosophy of life. It's that sense of purpose, that North Star, that gives everything else meaning and direction. It's what makes all the other pieces of a healthy personality just click into place.
So, a question for you. How on earth do you study one single individual in that kind of depth? Allport's method was, well, it was totally unique. Forget a sterile lab. He used a mailbox. And it led to a case study that went on for more than 10 years.
Get this. For 11.5 years, Allport and his wife, Ada, exchanged letters with a woman they gave the pseudonym Jenny Gove Masterson. Now, they weren't her therapist or anything like that. They were just a sounding board, a neutral ear. And over the course of 301 letters, they got this unbelievably detailed front-row seat to the inner workings of her personality.
And if you look at the timeline, it's pretty revealing. The letters start, everything's going along, and then, a few years in, tragedy strikes. Her son Ross dies suddenly. And for the next 8 years, her letters are just full of suspicion, hostility. She's blaming everyone else for her problems. But here's the key thing. Despite this huge, life-altering event, her core personality, it didn't really seem to budge.
Ada Allport, his wife, summed it up perfectly after Jenny passed away. She said, in the end, she was the same, only more so. Wow, what a powerful statement. This whole long-term study was a huge piece of evidence for that dispositional view, the idea that our core traits are just remarkably stable, even when life throws the worst at us.
So, that was decades ago. But Allport's ideas, especially that whole unifying philosophy of life thing, they didn't just disappear. Nope, they've had this incredible legacy. And what's really cool is that modern science is now picking up these concepts and testing them in ways Allport probably never even dreamed of, like connecting them directly to our physical health.
So Allport dug into this unifying philosophy idea, and he broke it down in a really interesting way, specifically around religion. He saw 2 different approaches. The first is intrinsic. This is where your belief is this deeply held core part of you. It's a genuine master motive. It's just how you live. And then there's the extrinsic orientation. This is where religion is more of a tool, right? It's a means to an end, maybe for security or social connections or comfort.
And this distinction, it was absolutely crucial for him. He saw that deep intrinsic commitment as a real sign of maturity. But it also helped him solve a puzzle that bothered him. He noticed that a lot of very prejudiced people were also frequent churchgoers. How could that be? Well, he suggested their extrinsic orientation was the answer. They were using religion, not living it. It was about feeling secure and fitting in, not about a deeply held philosophy of compassion.
Okay, so this leads us right up to today with a really mind-blowing question. Can these different ways of believing,
Can they actually have a physical, measurable effect on our bodies? Could your philosophy of life literally change your blood pressure?
No, a study by a guy named Kevin Masters and his team did exactly that. They put Allport's theory to a very modern test. They found a group of older adults and figured out who had an intrinsic orientation and who had an extrinsic one. Then, they gave them some light stress tasks, like doing math problems, and they hooked them up to a blood pressure monitor. Super simple, super direct.
And the results? Whoa, they were not subtle. Just look at this. The group with the extrinsic orientation, their blood pressure shot way up during the stressful tasks. But the intrinsic group? A much, much smaller reaction. I mean, they were facing the exact same stress, but their bodies were handling it in a profoundly healthier way.
So what's the bottom line here? The research strongly suggests that having one of these deeply internalized intrinsic belief systems acts like a physical shield, a buffer against the stress of everyday life. It's amazing. Allport's psychological idea turned out to have a clear, measurable, real-world impact on our bodies.
Okay, let's pull this all together. What are the big takeaways? First, personality is built on stable internal traits. Second, psychological maturity isn't just some vague idea. It's a definable, achievable thing. Third, and this is huge, our deepest beliefs can actually affect our physical health. And maybe most importantly, Allport championed the simple but profound idea that every single one of us is unique and worthy of study on our own terms.
And that leaves us with one final thought. And it really gets to the core of Allport's optimistic view of us. So many theories are obsessed with looking backward, at our past, but Allport's work is always pushing us to look forward. So I'll leave you with this question. Are we really just a product of our past, or are we defined by the person we are choosing right now to become?